This video is brought to you by Audible. Audible, get your audiobooks on. Use the link provided for a free trial. It helps us keep the show going.
Driving home from my night lab, realized something had changed.
As my comments throughout the Kyoryuger reviews about Sentai after it should have tipped you off, I hate this series. I seriously think Reisha Sentai Toqger one of the worst Sentai ever made. And I have seen at least something of all of them at this point. That said, it's not entirely meritless, but they are drowned out by the idiocy of its cast members, and was given as much leeway as it was because it was being written by one of Toei's previous gold mines for success, Yasuko Kobayashi, who more often than not, even with how polarizing on the like-dislike table she can usually make something that brings in money for Toei. Unfortunately for them, resulting in Toqger massively underperforming from their original sales and ratings estimates, that was when Yasuko Kobayashi's career imploded. Over the course of 2014, she wrote 4 projects concurrently: Toqger, Zero Black Blood, Garo Hono no Kokuin, and JoJo's Bizarre Adventures Stardust Crusaders anime adaptation. And it overworked her severely to the point she has yet to recover from the resulting burnout. I have seriously not liked a single damn thing she has written since Zero Black Blood, and even that might change on the rewatch, because her shows never seem to get better, only worse on rewatch. Which is ultimately all ironic, as much of the storyline and events in this Versus movie were an attempt to call out Kyoryuger by Kobayashi for things she found wrong with the Electro Beast Sentai. Except, the grand majority of them backfired out of ineptness and people recognizing the bullshit of the Deus Ex Machina she tried to invoke. Instead of this being a microcosm of Kyoryuger's sins, it was intended as, we saw what was happening in the film and thought to ourselves, they really did this so much better in Kyoryuger itself as it didn't actually do these things. With everyone essentially seeing everything with the Kyoryus a pale imitation of them at best. As what was missing from this was a feeling of respect, and what they did didn't reflect their past actions, selves, or series. For as much as you can hate how much the Go-Busters were sidelined in their own damn team-up movie, there was at least respect shown to them by the other cast's interaction with them, their power sets, most of their storyline, and they were all in character. And had the movie been more focused on those interactions instead of a freaking fight scene, they might have been allowed more prominence. But that is not applicable here. Instead, most of what the Kyoryus experience are actually sins of Toqger's entire storyline and were immediately recognized as such, with them sidelining the cast for stupid reasons, making other characters right when all evidence says they should be wrong, a recurring problem with everything Kobayashi writes, the villains following impulses that are entirely contrary to their own goals, again a moniker of a Kobayashi series, and its main villain comes out of nowhere and the cast are subject to conditions and limitations that make no goddamn sense. And the sad thing is, this is still better than any of the Toei crossover events that have multiple hero groups fighting amongst each other for stupid reasons. That's the hierarchy for bad we have here. Not enough screen time, disrespecting characters to promote another team, writers' issues with others' works are due to stupid story contrivances, character assassination to invoke fighting or conflict among hero factions. And yes, the second and third tier are differing things, and yet this movie commits the sins of all three. This film is on par with how awful a Spring movie is, and yet it's not even the worst Versus movie. They still go down from here. And worse, this was not the first goddamn time she has done this with a Sentai team-up. She did this with Go-Onger when they teamed with the Shinkenger. She did this with Go-Go 5 when they allied with the Ginga Man. I almost called her out for the awfulness of Gokaiger vs. Go-Busters, but apparently that idiocy was the fault of Kento Shimoyama, the writer behind fucking Ninja. But the point I'm trying to make is, she does not do team-ups well. Almost every time she does one, it ends up openly insulting the other team as they don't conform to her own personal and political ideologies, which she expresses through her writing. So, Toqger Primer. During the events of a star festival, the Emperor of the Shadow Line, Zeto, witnesses the brilliance of light for the first time from the depths of his blackened existence and becomes fascinated by it, surging his power up in an attempt to grasp that light for himself. As such, the residents of the town that light came from were consumed by darkness, frozen in time, and forgotten by all that their home even existed. 5 kids, with the power of the light of imagination, escaped this event, and thanks to the actions of the Rainbow Line, are wiped of their memories and turned into adults so they could be drafted soldiers in their war against the Shadow Line. That is not in any way hyperbole. The heroic side of this war drafted child soldiers. The good guys, on several occasions, act more openly and morally villainous than the actual antagonists this series, and that is never in any form fucking recognized. That played a big part in breaking this series for me, as Yasuko Kobayashi has a history of asserting openly abhorrent, morally repugnant actions as unequivocally the correct and just thing to do, when they are not in any respect. But wait, Des! They had to do that because these kids had the light of imagination, which adults cannot possess. And if they don't possess an imagination, they can't see the trains of the Rainbow Line to be able to fight the shadows. They had to be the ones to fight off the Shadow Line with the power of their light! First off, that assertion is one of the more inherently offensive things about this show, as it is in every respect a lie. Any form of creativity, be it writing, drawing, constructing things from scratch, the entire process of making cosplay, or designing suits and art assets in games, hell, grabbing things and putting them on or taking them off shelves as you will actually have to create a mental visualization of where they're going or coming from to do them in a serviceable time, utilizes one's imagination. It is something every fucking single person on the planet has. Second,
うわすげえなこの列車に乗ってんのかやっぱりコウタには見えるんだ
adults, and I mean actual fucking adults, that can see the Rainbow Line and fight the shadows exist. This team-up features characters that can see the Rainbow Line trains, meaning anyone that does should have absolutely zero problems at any point fighting anything for the Shadow Line because it shows they have the requisite imagination to actually damage them by the series' own logic. Try again. Third, it is established at no point that it is imagination alone that hurts the Shadow Line. In fact, any source of light, be it sunlight or the light of one's soul, is shown to weaken and eventually harm them. Imagination is simply the means by which this team channels that light to power their equipment. And finally, fourth, the show rarely actually showed the Toqger utilizing forms of imagination or being imaginative in their creation of solutions. Instead, much of what they did is in fact synonymous with the word delusion, and likewise when implementing them, acted as if they were trapped in delusions.
私は強い私は強いスーパーだ
And I hate to break it to you, but we already have a Sentai team specialized in delusions. They're called the Kyouryuger. Though ironically, the Kyouryuger also had a "you keep using that word, it does not mean what you think it means" thing with their use of delusion, as being what powered them, as their solutions were often creative, imaginative, and fantastical, at least certainly more than the Toqger's ever were. Which only furthers the discourse over this point about adults not having imagination. If an adult Sentai team in a show explicitly directed at adult fans was more imaginative than the one with the kids whose entire power set is the power of imagination. So, bottom line? Yeah, no. Even in story, there was zero actual legitimate reason to draft kids into their war. All this characterization of these kids turned into adults to get around child labor laws did was make the cast insufferable, as the main actors acted like 5-year-olds, when their characters' ages was actually between 10 and 12. Some of them eventually mature to act closer to their actual fucking ages, and I mean the actors' ages, not the children. But by the point they do, it's too late and they've spent too much of the show being a nuisance, and it's not a natural development from a character arc, but slapped onto them in an attempt to fix the show's reception. All of Zeto's subordinates do not in any way understand Zeto's obsession with the light, thinking he wants to destroy it by consuming it, when his real wish to be lit by that light within himself is far more benign, but that is in no way recognized by any one and thing in the series who cannot comprehend an entity of such primal shadow ever obtaining such, even though the eventual sixth ranger of their team, named Akira, is a former Shadowline member himself and yet shows himself as fully being able to ignite within himself this light, as does two of the relevant Shadowline generals. Schwartz,
May the Schwartz be with you.
there, got that one out of the way, and Zeto's betrothed Grita, who gained that light by defying the traditions imposed by the more traditionalist members of Zeto's court that Zeto is also openly contemptuous over and himself rebelling against as well. Really, the reason I even lasted through Toqger to its end with my frustration of the show is that exact dichotomy was interesting to me. Zeto wants more than anything else to leave behind the archaic decadence that is the Shadowline's backwards traditions, laws, expectations, and malicious strategy, to unbind himself from this darkness, but the series never lets him. Nor actually bothers to ever give him closure or an epiphany that without darkness, the light he covets cannot shine, which could have driven him to revolution and reform the Shadowline's existence to not be a threatening power. The show instead breaking him of this rebellious free will of wanting to escape, so he becomes enslaved to the darkness, and primarily because the purported heroes of the series. So the ultimate moral told to us as Zeto is defeated and driven back into the depths of darkness, that of, you can't change your nature, so don't even try and conform to your preordained, pre-fated lot in life, even if you will ultimately bring suffering to others, is just repugnant. Yasuko Kobayashi, of course, not taking the better option because she is contemptuous of the entire ideal of rebellion, more than once breaking or beating down characters or franchises who have that as a motif or theme, in order to make them fall in line and be good little subservient members of society, as I found that autocracy and authoritarianism are recurring political ideologies promoted in her works. Again, I hate this show. I am completely biased in my loathing of this show, as unlike Kyoryuger's problems, which were in the background but people were more irritated at from their prior overuse in the franchise, what makes Toqger bad is always front and center in its story. I say with no hyperbole that the puppet was the best character. The only other thing you need to know is, once again, the film has a bit more expanded continuity, as Toei was at the time putting more work into dispelling the idea that their crossover movie events weren't canon, even if they contradicted canon and were in fact awful. Toqger vs. Kyoryuger ties into Toqger's earlier film, Galaxy Line SOS, which is actually where we begin this, as the Galaxy Line's operators... And no, this has nothing to do with anything in the Reichi Matsumoto extended universe. Are notified of a presence taking over one of their stations, which then falls from space to Earth, said to be taken by an entity with immeasurable power. Remember this point, it gets stupid later. The Toqger, as they are allied with the Galaxy Line, are notified of this and suit up to find the station, it crashing into a mountainside and infecting the area around it, causing Zorima and Cambrina to emerge around it. Okay, so, D-Boss is dead. His cells are what created those things. While Kyoryuger said a lot of them were seated in the ground and were left dormant, most of them were called upon or otherwise died with D-Boss itself. From the showcased area infection, it's implying this entity did it, but this entity is not D-Boss, and those things were directly created and evolved from D-Boss's power. Ladies and gentlemen, one of many Toei protagonists that is more irritating than Dax from Power Rangers Operation Overdrive. At least Dax meant well. Raito's just a fucking idiot that needs to shut the hell up. No, seriously people, Raito Suzuki is so despised that, since one of the ways to romanize his name is right, and how Yasuko Kobayashi constantly makes him right, when everything in the show says he should be wrong, that the fandom collectively came together and adopted the official unofficial nickname of Wrong for him. If you think that's bad, we alternate Bakaharu and leftovers for Akaninja Takaharu the next year, the latter nickname originating from Ninja vs. Tokyuger, where he shows himself to be so stupid an enemy can transfer all of his ninja ability into a clone, and the results it remains are no different than how he normally is, because he is literally that worthless of a character without his ninja powers. And Kyouryuger's Red Lucky is the completely obvious dumb luck, because he is a dumbass who only hasn't won a Darwin Award out of his excessive abuse of dumb luck. The Tokyuger's abilities are shown as completely worthless against these forces, this reminding me of Go-Go 5 vs. Gingaman, both in contradiction with the last movie where they kicked the asses of an enemy that challenged the power of multiple previous more experienced Sentai teams with zero effort shown on their part, but also the fact that no team has ever been shown to have been specialized so much that they are completely worthless against a different enemy faction. I mean, the last Versus movie showed that. The Go-Busters could do significant damage against other faction enemies. Yes, previous Versus films, the likes of, say, O-Ranger vs. Kakuranger showed one team having a more difficult time against an enemy type they're not familiar with, but that's due to them not having experience fighting that type of antagonist. Their powers weren't utterly worthless, they just weren't experienced in the talent specialization that another team had. This is making the Tokyuger completely inept. And mind you, I'm of the camp that thinks the Tokyuger are legitimately inept heroes, but not in this way. The rationale for this, if this were following Kyoryuger's logic, is because by the midpoint in Kyoryuger's story, even the foot soldiers of D-Boss were as strong as prior monsters of the week, thanks to D-Boss's power infusing them with more strength, which in turn made it so the Kyoryuger had to learn how to ignore this enhanced armor class by learning how to hit with strikes infused with their soul. The Tokyugers have not, nor ever go through, any training to draw out their powers. They just have them, thus are incapable of performing that kind of attack. First, that would not apply anymore because, again, D-Boss is dead, so they're back to being as strong as normal foot soldiers. 2, that is not at all the logic the movie uses, where it's all about the power set mattering, and you can transfer that power between people! You are made of stupid! But this just gives a bigger emphasis to the return of the true heroes of the movie. And Daigo and Amy have no difficulty turning the tides of this fight. I would complain about the Tokyuger not remembering their previous team-up to form Tokyo O Kyoryuger featuring Deadliner from Kamen Rider Tyson, but Toei has done their best to make it as if Kamen Rider Tyson, and frankly all of the spring movies, never happened to begin with how much of an embarrassment they have been. So I have no complaints about them having no knowledge of each other. And as the rest of the team comes in, it leads to, of course, the bombastic roll call. Again, this was how Kobayashi was trying to deride the Kyoryuger as conceited and inconsiderate, in that they hogged the spotlight and grandstand, and it backfired. Pun not intended. As fans didn't see it as that. It instead, helped by the earlier part of the scene, showing how inept the Tokyuger actually are. As Sentai teams, when they've had less experience than the Tokyuger now do at their point in the story, have shrugged off more powerful incidental explosions than that. And frankly, the Tokyuger weren't even that close to the blast, meaning they were injured and blown back by a fraction of its actual concussive force that wouldn't phase literally any other Sentai team. Thus, no, you are completely failing at showing the Kyoryuger as jerks. Especially since right after they have the decency to be embarrassed and apologize over that, while Wrong remains his usual inconsiderate asshole self. The Kyoryugers find a barrier has gone up around the station, the team splitting up to find a way past it. Kenjiro Spiker, Dinos Grander, Kyoryu Red Carnival. None of these are tried before splitting up to search for a path in that doesn't exist, since those are the skills and abilities they have available immediately that are designed for barrier breaking. This movie could be literally over now if this were not an idiot plot. Thus, Daigo is left alone, with a ridiculously awful haircut, to explain the situation, with the Toqger bringing him back to the Rainbow Line to talk, and them all being surprised he could even see the train as gasps! Adults don't have imagination! Again, why this aspect of the series was so derided as insipid to assert. They repeatedly show adults do have imagination, so that reason is utter bullshit.
うわすげえなこの列車に乗ってんのかやっぱりコウタには見えるんだ
Actually, using that clip from the Toqger Gaim Spring Combining Special has me think of another critique of this stupid team-up. How did they actually get Daigo on the Rainbow Line? It's been established within the series that you need a ride pass that is given out by the line to enter one of their trains, each of those devices being seen on the belts of the Toqger's team members, and was made a throwaway point that pulled Toei's own version of Judas Traveler Narutaki out of nowhere to give Kota one so he could even get on the frickin' train in that special. So pretty much Yasuko Kobayashi is ignoring all of her own rules about Toqger that she has been stressing throughout that show's entire run. And you know it's a strange film when said Spring Special's writer, Nobuhiro Mori, is outdoing Yasuko Kobayashi in respecting her work's own damn canon, considering Mori's behind Kyouryuger, which I think is even worse than Toqger. But of course, Daigo being able to see the Rainbow Line is actually an attempt to outwardly insult the guy, trying to frame him as a childlike idiot most reckless Sentai Reds are shown as, instead of the uncomplicated, direct alchemist Daigo actually freaking is. Thus, not even 10 minutes in, this film multiple times over is guilty of character assassination. Not helped that, as I've said, Kyoryuger was constantly accused of getting rid of the rest of the team to near exclusively focus on Daigo, which I've spent a fair chunk of these reviews contradicting and showing evidence for why that isn't so. Here, however, there is absolutely no defense for it. This movie is actually factually guilty of that sin, to the point that Kyoryuger collectively, when you exclude Daigo, are at about 5, at most 10 minutes of the film. The Go Busters in Kyoryuger's vs. Go Busters got more screen time and relevance than that. This movie does everything it can to remove the relevance of nearly every other Kyoryuger team member to focus exclusively on a team-up of the Toqger with Daigo. You fucked up with your own backhanded commentary, Kobayashi. Oh, right, that's Wagon, the train's waitress. I've never hated a robotic entity as much as her, and I am someone that spent 6 hours explaining why Mass Effect 3 was an idiot plot. Daigo is finally allowed to get to the point. 1. How would you know that? 2. That's not an explanation! The train conductor somehow knows of Devious. How? It's a space invader. You're terrestrial. And how it created D-Boss. And here's where we get to, again, Yasuko Kobayashi not understanding the prior series, or frankly any of Riku Sanjo's work. Every series Riku Sanjo has ever written has had an open-ended finale. They tease a next antagonist and continuing struggle or post-series quest, but we are never supposed to see it. Because though the series is over, the lives and journeys of its characters do not end just because we're no longer seeing them on screen. We saw this with Double in the 2-in-1 Riders reunion as Gaia Memory Crimes continued past Museum's defeat and Foundation X's withdrawal. We saw this at the end of Forge with the cast just going back to class with a future goal of meeting the alien presenters that the series had as the origins of making their sect learn of cosmic energy. We had this with Drive and Shinosuke Tamari continuing on in his work as a police detective seeking to root out the evils hidden in the world, not unlike the Roid mutes he fought against. And Kyoryuger's in turn was the teased threat of this bigger bad guy the Kyoryuger were supposed to stay ever vigilant for, grow ever stronger to face, continue the legacy of their team from the past of the dinosaurs to the technological future. But it was never intended for that antagonist to ever be shown. It was, like all of these examples, a red herring. A misdirect distracting from the actual ending of the show, so as to leave the audience wanting more, and yet feel satisfied with the ending, as we were given a complete story nonetheless. He did this with Dragon Quest, the Guyver OVAs, at his stopping point for Beat the Vandal Busters. And there's good odds on him doing it at the end of the Fujo Detectives manga as well. And someone didn't get the memo. This was not a sequel bag or unfinished business left for the crossover movie. Hell, this isn't even an isolated incident. Kobayashi did this with Shinkenger vs. Go-Onger as well. Gaiarc President Bachid wasn't intended to be seen either after Yogoshima Kratin, God, that's a hard name to say, made mention of him at the end of Go-Onger, as the Go-Onger's journey was supposed to continue beyond their show's end credits. Though speaking of our terrible antagonist, his vassal Salamis meets with Zeto. Daigo says the team has been preparing for his arrival, but since they say they'd not seen each other for a while earlier, it more implies they all just went back to their normal lives, explaining that Devious in space exists as energy, but on Earth needs a physical form. Again, how do you know that? There is literally no possible way for you to know that. Even Taurine didn't seem to know that D-Boss had a creator, and he got most of his knowledge about D-Boss from D-Boss, so he's not a source on this. The station was taken over to create one, and if they can get to it before the awakening, they can win. And this movie is thus ripping off and repeating the final arc of Kyoryuger. Subtle! And thus, Salamis' reason for meeting with the Shadow Line. He wants them to keep all forces occupied for just one day, after which Devious will awaken and do what D-Boss failed to and destroy all life on Earth. But as he has no trace of light within him, and working with Devious would in fact screw over his own goals of obtaining the light of surface life, Zeto has little interest in Devious or his plans, so throws Salamis out. Yeah, no, they're fully on board with helping them. Wrong is likewise eager to help, but Daigo points out, rightfully, that without the ability to put their spirit into their attacks to ignore D-Boss's minions, they would just be a liability, and get themselves killed. Plus, Daigo's observation abilities allows him to be able to tell their children in adult bodies, so he shouldn't endanger them with such fighting. Which makes him a more responsible adult than the guys running the Rainbow Line. Daigo jumps off the train at this point to get back to work, Wrong being his usual asshole self and wanting to defy the guy who just tried to keep them safe, with the others trying to stop him. It is seriously sad that damn Puppet is the best fucking character in that show. But as said, the movie makes him right, with the earlier character assassination of Zeto and his own damn motivations making it so they now have to be involved. But that's not shown immediately. Instead, we see Uching waiting at a train station for the train so he can meet everyone else. You can fly! Hell, the Kyoryuger have access to teleportation panels, and moreover, Uchi is the only one of them without a day job. He is a full-time Kyoryuger, so he should have been one of the first responders to this. And that's not even touching on how they have the Dino Chaser bikes he could have ridden up there. Why are you waiting for a train? Why, so he can be the first to encounter the Shadow Line, of course, and show that the Kyoryuger are completely incapable of harming their army. Why? Seriously, why? It was never established at any point that Shadow Line members cannot be harmed by normal means. While it is shown over the series that the power of light, any light really, weakens them, it's not just light that harms them, even though this movie is fully playing off the show's premise that the Tokuger's power is the light of imagination banishing the darkness, and that light is Zeto's obsession. However, that light of imagination, it really isn't. It's an expression of the purported brilliance of their soul expressed through the medium of imagination. It is, at the end of the day, their spirit. And thus, this ties back to my earlier critique about the Tokuger being worthless against the D-Boss forces being bullshit. They both have the ability, though expressed in different ways, within their given narrative, to harm the other's forces by that same common medium. They are placing aspects of their souls into their attacks. What differs is the medium by which they are being channeled, bravery and imagination, respectively. But the ultimate result should be the same. The Kyoryuger ignored their enemy's armor class by punching them in their spirit and soul. Thus, even by the rationale that the shadows are a physical manifestation of a spiritual energy in the full reverse of the physically strong but spiritually weak D-Boss forces, that rationale fails with how the Shadow Line, repeatedly, have been shown to be spiritually weak entities that prefer to encroach and corrupt in massive numbers that congeal into a stronger force of darkness that are just beaten down by any glimmer of light. A light the Kyouryuger have trained themselves to intimately grasp because D-Boss also drew on the power of darkness to screw with them that they actually had to train or learn to overpower to actually win, while the Toqger do it either innately or have it drawn out for them. Hell, that makes the only difference between the two groups now physical capability, which the Kyoryuger win hands down, and would more explain the earlier nonsense with them getting kicked back by a non-injury causing explosion, as all they've had to rely on is a spirit-based power to fight with. Thus, they're uniquely unbalanced physically versus the Kyoryuger, which has trained and drawn upon both aspects. But if it seems I'm beating that same damn horse with this movie, that's essentially the movie. Its narrative and its rationales for its narrative are in complete contradiction with itself, and how it presents those facts all to make wrong right. And you could have easily gotten yourself out of this too, had Wrong phrased his desire to help them, not on a stupid defiant impulse which ignored the danger and threat to their lives, but wanting to take actual responsibility as it's their duty to the Rainbow Line and their friends of the Galaxy Line to help them. That's what they were out here for to begin with. Daigo then agrees, they come along, discover the Shadow Line now helping Devious. Though instead of Zeto idiotically agreeing, I would have had him refuse. Then Salamis attack him and just steal the power of the Shadow Line and or brainwash their units as that's what ends up happening later in the fucking movie anyways! That way, you don't make Zeto oppose his own character motivations to do this sect of the film. And thus you have Wrong make a good, responsible decision for the literally first time ever, which leads into a proper team-up where he isn't a smug, conceited jackass the world makes correct. And it's not like a Sentai Versus movie has never done that before between a responsible Red Ranger and a hyperactive, idiotic one. Hell, that's not even abnormal for a previous Dinosaur Sentai team-up movie!
ジャカンジャ俺たちの敵なんだあんたたちこそ邪魔をしないでくれそれにあの人たちも言ってたじゃないですかもうジャカンジャじゃないエボリアンってそれなら俺たちも黙って見てるわけにはいきません
And that was good enough for their seniors in that situation, as it has been the grand majority of the time in the good Sentai team-up movies, and Ryoga was in Wrong's position in things in that movie. But no, it really feels like every time Kobayashi has a chance to actually not show her heroes as assholes, she flips a coin. In Wrong's case, his short-sighted selfishness, which should be a character trait condemned as anywhere else it would be getting people killed, is instead framed as something worthy of praise despite all evidence to the contrary. This really is a microcosm of why I can't stand her work anymore, and is what is actually wrong with modern Sentai.